Equality is a topic that is fundamental to my why, and it's fundamental to my oath as a lawyer. Right now, African Americans have established a majority within our country to effectuate change and move forward. The question remains, how do we keep that majority together? How do we keep it aligned for the long period of time it's going to take to effectuate change that's necessary to heal the fear between the races that we have that has gone on for so long? And make no mistake, it's fear that we need to heal. Fear has gripped us for so long, and it runs so deep that it's going to be very difficult to break hold of. To understand that fear, we have to understand its history. Thomas Jefferson made the promise of equality in the Declaration of Independence when he wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that each is endowed by his Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." No statement in the history of our country has ever been as profound and direct to the core of American culture than that promise. But that promise has not been realized and not been given to African Americans equally. To understand how deep this runs, we have to look backward. We have to look at the history. And this history is not to shame anyone, not to say that any of us are responsible for the actions of our ancestors or any of that. We just have to know the history so that we know how deep this problem is and what we have to do to move forward. And to understand the history really is as simple as looking at a timeline. A generation is 30 years. And if you look at the beginning of our country from 1776 until now, we are 9 generations into this experiment that we call the United States of America. And in the first 3 generations of African Americans, they lived under slavery. So those 3 generations had no opportunity. And then we ran into the worst decision in the history of the United States Supreme Court. It was a case called Dred Scott versus Sanford. And in that case, our Supreme Court declared that African Americans could never be American citizens, that African Americans were not created equal. The promise of the Jefferson equality runs so deep and so fundamental to the core of who we are that we fought a civil war over this proposition. And the 13th and the 14th Amendments, you would think on paper, solve the problem, because they say that African Americans are indeed treated equal, that they are indeed created equal. But it's naive to think that that solves the problem of equality, because we know that following the 13th and 14th Amendment, America became segregated. We had black areas, we had white areas, never equal. And at the end of the 1800s, in 1896, our Supreme Court had an opportunity to put an end to that. But in the case of Plessy versus Ferguson, instead of ending segregation, the court ratified it and declared it the law of the land, and said that separate can be equal. So, in the first half of the 20th century, while we were building the greatest, largest, most wealthy middle class that the world has ever seen, another 2 generations of African Americans was kept from that opportunity by the wall of segregation. Because we know that separate was never equal. And the promise of Jefferson's equality was only given to a rare few. Among them was, to me, the greatest lawyer of the 20th century, a man named Thurgood Marshall. Mr. Marshall took on a plan of attack to focus on unequal treatment, to focus on equality. His journey led him to the Supreme Court in the case of Brown versus Board of Education. And it was the middle of the 20th century, in the early 1950s, that an all-white Supreme Court finally declared that separate could never be equal, that segregation was unconstitutional. And you would think that once segregation was outlawed, that opportunity would become plentiful, that equal treatment would finally be the law of the land. But there was a catch. There's always a catch. In Brown versus the Board of Education, the court ordered the schools to desegregate with all deliberate speed. With all deliberate speed meant no hurry. Because 64 years later, we still have not fully desegregated our schools. So there's always been a catch. And it's really only been the last 2 generations of African Americans that have had any real opportunity to bring themselves out of generational poverty. And more have done so. And that's just how deep this problem runs. It runs through all 9 generations. And that's why when Dr. King spoke of equality, he could only speak of it as a dream. I'm making these videos because I believe that better matters. And my why is to make things better. If you like what you see, consider liking or subscribing. And if you want to find these videos, you can find them here on this channel. And if you want to find out more about our law firm, you can visit our firm website at kcinjury.com. Thanks for watching, and be well.